Hello, my name is Victor. The sole purpose of this channel is to register my progress in the development of this game. The uploads in this channel will not be frequent. This means that I will be posting longer videos with a bunch of progress in a longer spare time. With that, I will not be talking only about my game, but also about the inspirations and my personal life, for example. This is my game, The Tale of the Dying Sun. Without any guidance, the player will control a lonely character to explore a solar system and find out what happened and what he needs to do. Before I talk about the project itself, I want to contextualize for why I would commit myself to try developing a game of this scope alone. My favorite game of all time is Shadow of the Colossus. Since my childhood, when I played, I kept searching for similar games that would evoke the unique feelings I felt when playing that artwork for the first time. Of course, along the way I found games that provoked similar feelings, but not quite made it. With that, I started developing games and prototypes as a hobby since I was in childhood too. In these 10 years of projects, I realized that if I want to feel those feelings I felt while playing Shadow of the Colossus for the first time, I would need to make that game myself. The first basic ideas and prototypes were literally Shadow of the Colossus copies. They were discontinued fast, and my inexperience in decoding, modeling, and art direction made all the worse. These ideas were more about the form than the function and art of the game itself. Years after these prototypes, I realized that a really good and unique game needs to have a consistent and unique idea. So, let me start to talk about the project. The first thing I coded was the game physics. Often most of the games take place in a plane where you can be sure that the down direction will be always below your feet. But that logic doesn't apply here for games that are in the surface of a planet. As the player moves, the physics and directions will always change. This is not only applied for the gravity of the objects, but to all the code that influences movement, for example, the camera. With that in mind, I developed physics using real formulas, such as Newton's law of universal gravity. Of course, using real constant values would make things break a bit because the game engine doesn't support so big calculations, so I took artistic license to tweak the values a bit to make a more gameplay-wise experience. For example, lowering the gravitational constant would make the player jump higher. This makes jumping the game less realistic but more fun. After that, I made simple testing playground to make sure that the objects and planets were behaving correctly. At this time, I have not implemented the planetary movement yet. This is a matter that I will be handling soon. The next step was to make a character move around the planet, so I spent a couple days modeling and coding a testing dummy. The model resembles a final design I want for my character, but for now, the rough shape is fine. After this, I made a placeholder for a big part of my character design, the cape. The cape will be a key visual element to show the textures and the scenery to communicate naturally for the player how the gravity is affecting the character. Finally, I made the second main character, the spaceship. I had not had the final design in mind, so I spent a couple days modeling, and at the end I was happy with the result. After this, I coded a basic spaceship movement, and the basic mechanics were ready. With the character done, it was time to start the real hard coding, the planet's atmosphere and terrain. I could make the simpler approach and make a less ambitious feature, but the planets are a key aspect of this project, and I want to make an almost perfect implementation to enhance the environmental storytelling, since it's the main aspect of this game. So, before I even started in this project, I researched for months about shader programming and papers about planet atmosphere scattering. This was by far the hardest prototype I ever coded in my life, but thanks to a kind soul called Sebastian Lag and his amazing videos, I had a good starting point to research these topics. After months, I had a shader where the light would be affected depending on the length that would travel in the atmosphere. This is a very expensive calculation for the GPU, and I want to improve its performance in the future. The next step was to make a planet terrain. This is not so difficult. What I coded was a generic cube with a customizable resolution. I normalized the vertices distance with the center, and I had a sphere. After that, I made all the vertices of the planet pass through a noise function to calculate the height of that specific vertex on the planet. In the end, I had a simple procedural planet. Of course, we have some stones in the way. If the focus of my game is environment and storytelling, a procedural planet is not the best approach. So I made the planet height be calculated with a height map. That is a texture that will dictate the height of the terrain. This gives me absolute control of what the terrain will look like in the planets. With that finished, I had another big problem: optimization. Every planet is really big, with lots of vertices being rendered and collisions being calculated every frame. This made my game kept at roughly 200 frames per second. So I started researching terrain level of detail with quad trees. This is a data structure approach to make the terrain near the player have much more vertices than the faraway terrain. This makes the game so much faster and affects little the visuals of the game. I planned the game to have around 6 planets, which one very different from another. For this, I need to implement unique shaders, colors, and height maps. For this first planet, I plan to do something similar to Earth. I coded a shader that calculates the texture based on the stiffness of the face and apply a noise to make a more natural transition between the stiffness texture and a flat face texture. Finally, the last and most fun feature I added was grass. There are a bunch of ways that grass can be implemented in games. For this project, I could make realistic grass by instantiating a lot of blades and applying a wind effect. But I want a mossier looking grass and a more humid feeling for the planet, like the terrains of Death Stranding. For this, I used a geometry shader and a method of shells. The shell technique consists of generating multiple layers in the model, like a bunch of shells, like the name suggests. These layers are affected by a mask texture, in this case, a noise texture that will dictate how the grass will look. The lower layers will almost not be affected, and the higher layers will be highly affected by the noise texture. This makes the grass look like a 3D model, but it's actually an illusion with a bunch of 2D textures one above the other. Curious enough, this technique was used to make the fur of the creatures in the PlayStation 2 version of Shadow of the Colossus. This proves how this technique is really optimized, since it will run in older software and hardware like the PlayStation 2. Similar to the texture in the terrain, I made the grass only appear where the steepness of the terrain was low. That means faces that were more flat. This made sure that the grass did not appear on the side of the mountains, for example. This is the progress I made in these months of development. I would like to talk more in depth about all these topics, but this would make the video really long. In the far future, I plan to make a crowdfunding to raise some economy to hire talented people to make stuff like music and animation for this game. But for that, I need my game to be noticed by some audience. This is the purpose of my channel and other social media that I will be creating to share more stuff. If you liked it, please, leaving a thumbs up in this video would be a great help for me. Also, if you liked the content and look forward to more, I invite you to subscribe for future videos. See you in the next Devlog. Bye.